Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. This week, people with mental health challenges or substance use disorder often end up in jail, but crisis response teams offer another path.
We're getting these guys and gals to voluntarily want to go to rehab and treatment. They're wanting to go, and a lot of them are telling us hey, they treated me like a person.
1 year after the Mountain Valley Pipeline went into service, people who live directly in the pipeline's path have received compensation, but not everyone.
The landowners adjacent got nothing, even if they messed up their water or whatever. And they messed up a lot of people's water, wells and everything, but they got no compensation from it.
And the Sacred Harp songbook gets an update for the first time since the early 90s. You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia.
Support for this program is brought to you by Solar Holler, building on West Virginia's history of powering the nation by bringing solar power to the coalfields. Information at solarholler.com. Support for this program is provided by the Thrasher Group, an architecture, engineering, and field services firm serving West Virginia clients and communities since 1983. More information at thethrashergroup.com.
Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. Appalachian communities have long dealt with high rates of substance use disorder and mental health challenges. And the toll is felt by everyone. The person in crisis, their families, even police officers and EMTs. In West Virginia, the problem reached a boiling point during the COVID-19 pandemic. The systems couldn't handle it. So, a few localities tried something new. And so far, it seems to be working. Over the last several months, I spent time with crisis teams in Huntington and Princeton, West Virginia, and produced the following story in collaboration with the Carter Center and the Mental Health Parity Newsroom Collaborative. A warning, the story contains descriptions of suicide attempts, substance use disorder, and mental health crises.
Do we have Narcan in here? Are we good?
5 days a week, Cabell County, West Virginia's Quick Response Team, or QRT, meets in an emergency medical services building in Huntington. It's a small city of 45,000 people on the western edge of West Virginia.
We need help.
The team small talks and jokes around.
He's driving. Leave him be.
I'm not picking on Scott.
The tone feels pretty light, especially given what the Quick Response Team does.
Okay. We're ready, Scott.
Their job is checking in on folks who've recently had an overdose or who are at high risk of an overdose. Basically, they're asked to engage with people with substance use disorder and other behavioral health issues. And they're doing it in a city that's known nationally for its struggles with opioids.
I think what brought it to the forefront probably is in 2016 we had an incident where we had about 28 overdoses in about a 4 or 5 hour period, and that made international news.
That's Connie Pretty, a registered nurse with Cabell County EMS and program coordinator for the Quick Response Team. She says EMTs saved all the folks they encountered that day, but a doctor soon realized that none of the individuals who overdosed were referred for follow-up, resources, or treatment.
So we said we finally realized we had a really huge gap and we weren't going to arrest our way out of the problem, so we were looking for a different way to do things.
They used an idea that came from Ohio, a quick response team consisting of first responders, health officials, and a peer specialist who has experienced substance use disorder or mental health challenges. They got a 3-year grant from the U.S. Department of Justice. And in 2017, the Cabell County QRT launched. The first year, they saw a 40% reduction in overdose calls. That's 700 fewer calls than the year before. But there was a learning curve.
Even in 2017, I think we had in our mind what we thought was a stereotypical client. And we quickly realized that we could go into an area that somebody might be living in an abandoned house with a dirt floor, and then the next minute we're going into $1 million home, where the family's inviting us to have a drink while we sit down and chit-chat, some iced tea or something.
In other words, the team recognized there was no stereotypical client. Sue Howland is the team's peer specialist.
I'm the person, no matter what the title, with lived experience. So in recovery, every path's different, but we have one common thread. We have disease that wants to kill us. I've walked through hell twice. I don't want to go back. I'm having too much fun living.
Howland went through treatment in 2011 and was later hired by the Mental Health Treatment Center. She was chosen to be part of the first quick response team, along with paramedic Larissa Barker. Barker says from the start, the community welcomed the team.
I think we anticipated there being some kind of like backlash, but we really didn't get that. I think people were very open to the idea of this team. Parents, the clients themselves, spouses are like, no, please come in. Like, we need to talk about this. That made our job so much easier when we weren't facing like scrutiny or anger, right? We were never met with that.
West Virginia faces a steep challenge when it comes to addressing behavioral health issues. In a 2023 survey, 38% of West Virginians reported symptoms of anxiety or depression, about 6 points higher than for the U.S. as a whole. And West Virginia's drug overdose death rate was nearly 3 times higher than the national average in 2021. Those higher rates of mental health challenges and substance use disorder have strained first responders, who already have limited resources. Most of the time, the people responding are law enforcement officers, firefighters, and emergency medical technicians, who aren't always trained to deal with these kinds of problems. So people tend to end up in jail, or they cycle in and out of crisis. Programs like the Quick Response Team are intended to train first responders and divert more folks away from the criminal justice system toward treatment.
You're there right now, right?
The Cabell County Quick Response Team is making its rounds. They get a call to check on a woman who walked into one of Huntington's EMS stations.
We will be on our way.
Okay, she's got a place to go.
All right, see you in a bit. Let's go to EMS headquarters.
She says the police took her pedals off of her wheelchair, and she wants to.
The woman's been shooed from an abandoned house by police.
Where is the house? Do you know the address? Or
She has a port in her neck from recent medical treatment, and the EMS crew has administered Narcan out of concern. She seems confused and asks to be dropped off at a low-barrier shelter for unhoused people.
All right, well, tell you what.
What?
So we can pack up all your stuff. We can put you in our car, take you to go get the stuff for your wheelchair. And if the police kicked you out of there, then it's likely that you can't go back to that house, right? Is that house boarded up? Do we know if it's boarded up? Or?
Not at all of it.
Not all of it.
I'm not sure what kind of house. She said she was using the bathroom in a bucket, so that's all I can tell you.
Okay. All right.
Upstairs.
Well, so it's likely you can't, like, not allowed to go back there. And we don't want you to, like, get in trouble for being back there because then there's trespassing and, all that. Okay. Well, tell you what, if you pack up all your stuff, we'll get you and your wheelchair packed up, and then we'll go to that house real quick, okay?
Okay.
Shelters for unhoused people play an important role in Huntington. The city's poverty rate is about 27%. That's more than 10 percentage points higher than the West Virginia rate and 16 points higher than the national average. An annual count found that the number of unhoused people in the area was on the rise. Mitch Webb is executive director of the Huntington City Mission.
I'm convinced more and more that the addiction is a symptom of likely mental health or other things. The number of people who have co-occurring, dual diagnosis, substance use disorder, and mental health disorders, that seems to have grown.
Webb says the Quick Response Team has become a vital partner to the city mission. Twice a month, it sets up a booth to do everything from linking people to services to dressing wounds. And its team members have made a difference in people's lives. People like Silly.
My name is Fia Silly Fitzamanu Bartram. Everybody just calls me Silly. So I think I was probably in and out of addiction almost 21 years, in and out of prison for 17.
Silly says that Sue Howland and Larissa Barker went out of their way to check on her during that time.
I can remember when QRT started. I can remember Larissa riding around in this big hunk of junk and seeing me walking down the street, either on my way to get some drugs or just having gotten some, or trying to get my fix, jumping out of moving cars, chasing me down the street because she'd been looking for me. Are you okay? Where have you been? I haven't seen you. She was adamant to try to get me some help.
In 2022, Silly was arrested and asked to be put into a rehab program. After several months, she came out and got an apartment. And a few months after that, she got a job at the Huntington City Mission, the same place she was a client for so many years. After the break, the future of crisis intervention in West Virginia is in doubt, even though it's helping. I head south to Princeton, West Virginia, and learn about a program that's keeping people out of jail. You're inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. We're back with our story about crisis intervention in West Virginia. On the other side of West Virginia, in the southern coalfields, is the city of Princeton. About 5,500 people live in Princeton, which has a poverty rate of 21%. That's significantly higher than the state and national average.
Hey, buddy. My name's Dalton. I'm a CIP officer with McDowell County Sheriff's Office. This is my friend.
It's a mild September day, and a sheriff's deputy and a mental health worker cautiously approach an agitated man with caution.
Cold.
Okay, I understand that you're cold. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on?
The man is wearing bright orange inmate pants as he paces in front of a house.
Just take me to jail. Is that what you want to do? You said you're going to take me to jail.
The man in orange pants seems pretty agitated.
Just take me to jail.
The interaction is intense, but it's not a real-life situation. It's a role play that's part of a training exercise. This week-long training is designed to help first responders develop skills for when they interact with people in crisis. The class teaches the so-called 4 plays of crisis intervention. Introduce yourself, get the person's name, express what you see, hear, or have been told, and summarize the situation. The role-playing exercise gives trainees a chance to practice what they've learned in a possible scenario.
What do you think?
Well, I think you should come up with us and let's help you out and go take you to the store, get you some clothes, something to eat, help you find a place to stay.
How am I going to get there? If you're going to make me walk?
No,
we'll
you
give you
can
a
ride
ride.
with us.
I'll give you a ride?
Yeah.
Sounds like a good idea.
All right.
Sounds good.
All right.
The person experiencing the crisis was played by one of the trainers, Aaron Beeman, who works for the Princeton Fire Department. Beeman is part of the Southern West Virginia Crisis Intervention Team. The group works with responders from different agencies in McDowell, Mercer, and Wyoming counties. Those counties have some of the highest poverty rates in the U.S. Beeman says responders have seen a growing number of people experiencing mental health challenges.
Every call is different. You know, everything from every overdose is different to every EMS call to every fire is different. We pay attention on every call that we're going on. And there's some basic medical calls that we've ran and realize there's something else going on here. They're calling for this, but that's not really what's going on. Let's get to the bottom of it, and after talking to them and dealing with them, you'll find out that they've got an underlying mental illness.
Identifying that underlying mental illness is a novel approach, one that's working. But not everyone embraced it from the start, including Beeman.
I was one of the ones that was against it. I thought it was a sham. I thought it was a joke.
Beeman admits some of his resistance stemmed from overwhelm, from the sheer volume of calls that come in. For years, first responders across southern West Virginia have been inundated by calls for help related to both opioid use and mental health challenges. Sometimes there's overlap, and Beeman and his colleagues just wanted to get the job done.
So we all were those people. Wanted to get in, get out, didn't care what we said, didn't care what we treated. You were doing drugs, you made that choice. Live with it or don't.
But beginning in 2021, something changed.
I beat the streets constantly, just knocking on doors.
That's Candace Nelson, who coordinates the CIT program for Southern Highlands Community Mental Health Center in Princeton. Nelson was tagged to lead the program from the start. She spent a lot of time taking food to fire departments, emergency medical service providers, and law enforcement agencies, trying to get them interested.
They didn't always open the door, but they always took my stuff. So I felt like I was like inching in.
One of those places she was inching into was the Princeton Fire Department, where Beeman worked.
She'd show up with food. We'd open the door, grab the food, shut the door, and lock her out. Was 3 years ago now, 2.5, 3 years ago, we had a firefighter that was a Princeton City firefighter commit suicide. And that night, the word got back to Candace.
And I told Lisa, my boss, I said, if you truly want to take care of first responders, now is our time.
She called her boss and was like, listen, I may get hurt for doing this, but I'm grabbing food and I'm going through that door. And she did. That was the first night when she come to the door, she was allowed into our station. And she went to a back room, and back to our classroom, and that's where she sat. And as everybody was processing, we were slowly filtering into her. And that's where the bond started with her.
Folks can be skeptical going through CIT training. Role-playing feels silly at times. But the first responders who went through the training and applied it started seeing a difference.
We're getting these guys and gals to voluntarily want to go to rehab and treatment to find the underlying cause. They're not being threatened with law enforcement. They're not being threatened with jail time. They're wanting to go. And a lot of them are telling us hey, they treated me like a person.
A key component of most crisis response teams is a peer support specialist, someone who's been there before. And that's true of the team here in Southern West Virginia. Katie Slaughter is the CIT peer support specialist.
Well, I'm in recovery myself. I have almost 14 years clean. So I started out with Southern Highlands in the substance use disorder part of the system.
Slaughter works on both the crisis intervention team and the region's quick response team. And she says these programs work. Not every first responder buys in, though.
A lot of people think this is more of like a hug a thug type thing for officers, and it's not. We're not trying to soften them up, tell them not to do their job. And a lot of people think it's a hug a thug, and it's not. So
I've never heard that term before.
Yeah. That's what we call it, hug a thug, because that's what a lot of them thinks it is. They're like, we ain't doing the hug a thug program. And we're like, it's not that. Like, we're trying to help you to work a situation better so you don't have to arrest everybody you come across.
Slaughter and other trainers use the term a lot. Hug-a-thug is shorthand for a dismissive attitude towards CIT. The idea that showing empathy and looking for a nonviolent resolution to a situation is essentially a way of coddling criminals. Experts like West Virginia University professor Joy Hutchinson say there's evidence showing the approach works. Hutchinson spent 10 years as a paramedic in New Orleans and got burnt out.
Like I joke and I tell people I turned into what I refer to as a crispy medic, right? Burnout. Because you see the worst of people in a system where there's not a lot of real good help. I mean, our healthcare system is revolving doors. And so you're not liked by the communities you're serving, not because they dislike you, but because, I mean, we're showing up on their bad day.
Hutchinson needed mental health support as a worker in a very intense job. but she struggled to get the care she needed through the Employee Assistance Program, and eventually went to school to specialize in mental health care for first responders. She says CIT's effectiveness is supported by research.
I think CIT training is a wonderful thing in helping any first responder showing up to a call, giving them the ability to recognize and bring in the appropriate resources, right? Collaborating with different service, right? Whether it's the hospital, whether we are implementing bringing social workers or counselors onto scenes to de-escalate. However a department's looking at doing that, we have to train those who are responding first to recognize that this is needed, these resources.
In West Virginia, the culture shift is starting to happen. Take the experience of Anthony Epperson, Chief Field Deputy for the McDowell County Sheriff's Office.
We had a position for CIT and the officer retired. I volunteered for it, and because I don't think anybody else wanted to, because a lot of people felt like it was maybe terminology is hug a thug or whatever.
Epperson was skeptical too.
But I sort of just fell on the sword and said, I'll go do it. And during the class that week, I got a major eye-opener.
Epperson says CIT training wasn't what he expected at all.
We were suspecting as a department that this was just all about drugs and users, but after I'm in the class, I find that it's more about people in crisis, and you get a broader spectrum because everyone at some point experiences crisis. Even us as officers, we experience it. We go through things, we deal with things we can't unsee.
Soon after completing the class, Epperson was called to assist with an attempted suicide. The woman in crisis needed to get to a hospital and was refusing to go.
And so the trooper looks at me and he's like, you want to try that CIT stuff? And I was like, yeah. So I start talking with her, and it's almost like when I started talking with her and I started initiating the CIT and the 4 plays that we do, a light switch just kicked on. Instead of anybody having to argue with her or her getting off the ambulance and going back in there and possibly dying and finish herself off, she chose to go. And that's where it began with me as far as my first call.
In April 2024, Epperson was called to a cemetery where a woman was threatening to kill herself.
And I feel like that call has changed my life and my outlook on CIT altogether in my career. And am I thankful for everything that I've been trained for? Absolutely. Without CIT and the training that I received through CIT, I'm not sure how that call would have turned out that day, because it was high stress and quite unnerving at certain points. And talking to somebody for 30 minutes, and you're about to run out of things to say, and you don't know what the outcome's going to be. And then finally, like, all the adrenaline just dumps when the person relinquishes the gun and lays it down.
Successful outcomes are not just anecdotal. Research shows CIT works too. It significantly reduces the number of arrests of people with serious mental illnesses because they're diverted to receive treatment instead. It also reduces stigma and prejudice toward people with mental illness and makes officers more likely to identify and help people who need psychiatric care. Studies of CIT in Memphis, Tennessee and Albuquerque, New Mexico showed the training reduced officer injuries and SWAT team intervention. CIT even reduced how much time officers spent on mental disturbance calls, which allowed them to spend more time in the community instead. And research shows CIT programs save money over time. The National Alliance on Mental Illness reports the cost of jailing a person for a year in Detroit is 3 times more than the cost of community-based mental health treatment. Another study found that mental health crisis intervention programs resulted in a return of $2.16 for every dollar invested. Some West Virginia policymakers are starting to pay attention. Hollis Lewis represents a Kanawha County district in the West Virginia House of Delegates. He's also the West Virginia CIT project director.
When we talk about CIT, it's just adding a tool to our first responders tool belt. It doesn't, usurp any policies or procedures that they have in place. Considering West Virginia specifically, when we talk about mental health and SUD, we have a big problem here. So we have to be, trained and more conscious of how to deal with that.
Mercer County Commissioner Greg Puckett is also an advocate.
When you look at where we are as the society, we've got to be able to take care of those when there happens to be that crisis, right? And you got to figure out where to get the resources and the best available assistance. And so I'm a heavy proponent of both the QRT and the CIT. To bring it to Southern West Virginia is really important.
The QRT and CIT programs in West Virginia were funded from the start by a patchwork of grants. The grant funding allowed these programs to get established and proved the approach works. But the initial funding for both programs has now run out, and program officials like Connie Priddy and Candace Nelson have had to reapply. They've had some success. The Cabell County QRT received an award in December from the West Virginia First Foundation. That fund was established to distribute money from the state's settlements with opioid manufacturers and distributors.
It is important to have a program like a quick response team in a community to make sure that they can meet the person where they're at and lift them up to get them into those services when needed.
That's Matthew Christensen, who sits on the West Virginia First Foundation's board. He's also a doctor active in addiction treatment and the director of the West Virginia Office of Drug Control Policy. He says attitudes about substance use disorder and mental health are starting to shift, and the First Foundation recognizes the value of crisis intervention programs. In its first round of funding, it also awarded grants to several CIT programs around the state.
And one of the things that was really important to us as a board in our discussions was the role of law enforcement in the addiction response and the importance of supporting them. We wanted to be able to give them some tools and some resources to be able to address the issue in a way that they really felt like was making a difference. And so crisis intervention teams were one way to do that and to try to get the right tools in the right place at the right time.
But Christensen acknowledges grant funding only goes so far.
For many of these programs, it really is feast or famine. And so we need to be looking to the future about how we create a narrative of sustainability and a model that we can rely on that will help these programs continue in perpetuity for as long as they're needed.
Is there an argument that state policymakers, should they start considering funding these programs as a standard part of their budget process?
Yes, they absolutely should.
State lawmakers haven't funded crisis intervention programs through the state budget, which puts the burden on local governments instead. Here's WVU professor Joy Hutchinson.
The departments don't have the money, and that's where the problems come in. They're resistant to the idea of where am I going to get this money?
And Mercer County Commissioner Greg Puckett.
From a county commission side, yes, I would be much more willing to help support these programs. Problem with this, I don't have the revenue to which to do so. These programs, they're extraordinarily effective. They just are. It's evidence proven that they are effective programs. But if you want to fix the problem, you've got to put the money into that investment. And right now, all I hear is tax cuts. I'm a Republican. I'm a very fiscally conservative person. But I can tell you that if you don't figure out a way to put it in, you're going to lose tax revenue anyway.
In mid-April, West Virginia lawmakers voted to approve a state budget for fiscal year 2026. It did not include any direct funding for quick response team or crisis intervention team programs. West Virginia Public Broadcasting is part of the Mental Health Parity Collaborative, a group of newsrooms that are covering stories on mental health care access and inequities in the U.S. The partners on this project include the Carter Center and newsrooms in select states across the country. Since this story was first reported, Aaron Beeman has changed jobs. He now works with the West Virginia Division of Forestry and continues to work with the Southern West Virginia Crisis Intervention Team. If you or someone you know is struggling with substance use disorder or mental health issues, the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline in the U.S. is available by calling or texting 988. A Virginia Tech team is collaborating with community groups in Appalachian, Virginia to uncover and reclaim forgotten history. Part of the project involves the Calfee Community and Cultural Center in Pulaski. It's a former school that helped educate black students in the days before integration. Radio IQ's Roxy Todd has more.
Jacob Robinson grew up in Galax, and his grandmother traveled by bus to attend the Wytheville Training School. It was one of a handful of black schools across Southwest Virginia.
There was a huge emphasis on the institution of education for black community members here.
Schools like Wytheville and the Calfee Training School in Pulaski were built in the 1800s and stayed open until schools integrated.
A lot of folks don't know, but black folks in this region were highly educated during that time, especially in relation to other parts of Virginia.
Robinson is a researcher at Virginia Tech and is part of a team called Monuments Across Appalachian, Virginia. They're collaborating with 9 community groups to reclaim untold and overlooked history. One of those groups is the Calfee Community and Cultural Center, the organization that now calls the old Calfee school building home. Robinson says once Pulaski County integrated in 1967, many of the black teachers who had taught at Calfee left. One who stayed was Dorothy DeBerry Venable, a black coal miner's daughter who taught for 46 years.
In order to reach the children, you've got to get that on their level. We had fun.
Before integration, Venable taught second grade at Calfee for 15 years. When she discovered her students were learning from older textbooks than what students at the white school had, she complained to the school board.
Later on that day, this van from the school board office pulled up in front of the school, and guess who got new books? Me. I had been taught by my father that if something's not right, you complain.
Venable was the only black teacher in Pulaski County schools who kept a full lead teacher position when schools integrated.
I was the only one that was put in a regular classroom. It wasn't because I was so smart, but it was because I had a big mouth.
For her courage and resilience, Venable was one of 6 people honored with the Legends of Excellence Award at a recent ceremony hosted by the Calfee Center. Many of her students were in the room and gave her a standing ovation. During the ceremony, Calfee Center's executive director, Jill Williams, said heroes like Venable are important to celebrate.
And without those stories that are relatable and rooted in community, how do we inspire the next generation of leaders? How do we build a better future? We are living in a time when there's real pressure to whitewash our nation's history, especially the painful parts about slavery, segregation, and oppression. And while I understand the impulse to shield children from pain, the danger is this. When we don't teach the hard history, we also don't get to teach about the everyday heroes who resisted it.
At the ceremony, the Calfee Center also unveiled a special story quilt, which tells the history of 23 families who signed a lawsuit in 1947 to demand equal education for their children. Descendants helped design their family squares with photos and other memorabilia. A local quilting group put it together. Jamie Rosinski is a senior history major at Virginia Tech who helped with the project.
Especially nowadays in our current world, a lot of people feel like, including myself, feel like they don't have as much as a voice or they don't have as much in a say as what's going on in the world.
But working with the Calfee community to bring this history to light has changed that.
It makes me feel less small in the world. That, like, if these people in 1947 can sign on to a lawsuit and win, it makes me feel like I could make change in the world too, and just doing this project is a part of that change.
The Calfee quilt will now go on tour at several sites in Southwest Virginia, including 3 historic black schools that Rosinski says are connected to this history. In Pulaski, I'm Roxy Todd.
Virginia and West Virginia residents near the Mountain Valley Pipeline lived with anxiety for years during its construction. The pipeline went into service and began transporting gas 1 year ago, and its neighbors are still uneasy about its effects on their lives and property. WVPB's Curtis Tate has the story.
Paula Mann and her husband, Herman, live in the middle of Monroe County in far southern West Virginia.
On their sloped property, they have goats, ducks, and chickens. Mann sells her chickens' organic eggs at a farmer's market in Blacksburg, Virginia, about an hour away. The Manns have lived next to the Mountain Valley Pipeline since it began operating a year ago. The 303-mile high-pressure gas pipeline runs from north-central West Virginia to southern Virginia. It generated opposition and controversy during 6 years of construction and court battles.
Well, it was pretty upsetting because during the construction, we had people back and forth, the trucks and everything going up and down the road. They tore the road all to pieces, of course, and they scared my animals to death.
Among her lingering concerns, how the project affected their well water. Mann says their water was clean for decades before the pipeline came in.
Our water got muddy, which it had never done before. And we never had any trouble with it until after they started doing that construction, put that line in there.
Mann says the pipeline company recently took a sample of their well water to test it. They're awaiting the results. The company has repeatedly stated that it followed federal regulations and that the pipeline is safe. Residents who live near the pipeline, including the Manns, aren't as sure.
Yeah, and one of our fears has been that what if it blows up?
The pipeline crosses a gravel road about a quarter mile from where the Manns live. The 42-inch diameter line passes under the road and up moderate slopes on both sides. During the long pauses in construction, as court battles played out, Mann says sections of green pipe sat exposed to the elements.
It sat there and it faded. We got all kinds of pictures of it. And it was rusty inside. And the ends, they had ends on it, but they had fallen off, and some of them didn't have any ends, and it was rusty in there. And of course, it was rusty around where they have to weld them together and all that.
Construction of the pipeline across Monroe County is now the subject of a federal whistleblower lawsuit. Michael Barnhill is a former welding inspector on the project who lives in Texas. He claims in U.S. District Court in the Southern District of West Virginia that he was fired in late 2023 after raising safety concerns, including issues around corrosion and faulty welding. EQT, the natural gas producer that owns the pipeline, has asked Judge David Faber to dismiss the case. The Manns are not part of the lawsuit. Still, Paula Mann says the years of construction upended their lives. Some landowners got compensation for the pipeline to cross their property. Though they've had to live with the impacts of having the line so close to their home, the Manns received nothing.
Well, they paid the people where they went through their property. They paid them, but then the landowners adjacent got nothing, even if they messed up their water or whatever. And they messed up a lot of people's water, wells and everything. But they got no compensation from it.
The pipeline's builders took some landowners to court to gain access to their property through eminent domain. The courts allowed the company to take the property it needed to finish the nearly $10 billion project. The Manns weren't caught up in those disputes, but they've not had a warm relationship with the pipeline's operator.
They didn't like us that good anyway, because we opposed it. So.
Sean Day, a spokesman for the pipeline, says the Manns should receive the test results for their water quality in a few weeks. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Curtis Tate in Monroe County.
Since a U.S. Supreme Court decision opened the door, online sports betting is legal around much of the country. Online poker and casino gambling is legal in 6 states, including at multiple places in Appalachia. As gambling became more mainstream, states have moved to offer resources to help with gambling addiction. In West Virginia, there is the Problem Gambling Help Network at 1-800-GAMBLER. News Director Eric Douglas spoke with Sheila Moran of First Choice Services, which runs the helpline. She's also a certified gambling counselor.
Tell me about gambling addiction. What What is it? What drives it? How does it affect people?
Gambling addiction works in much the same way as other addictions. Of course, it's psychological. You're not putting anything into your body, but that doesn't mean that you're any less addicted to it.
An addiction is when it starts affecting your life or your ability to do your job.
Yes, that's perfect. We always say it's not how much you do it, and it's not about the money. We've had people call us who, at one point in their life, were millionaires. It just takes them a little bit longer to get to the bottom of the pile of money. So it's about how it's affecting your life, continuing to do something even though it's causing you problems.
2019 is when the online gambling really started to take off. In 2020, also coinciding with the pandemic. So the advertising money really took off in 2019, 2020. It might have moderated a little bit, but it's still huge. So how big is online gambling now?
Right. So around 2018, I think was the Supreme Court decision that allowed online gambling, and it took a little while in most places to get it off the ground, and that's when you started to see more advertising. It's been a really big shift for us at the 1-800-GAMBLER helpline. We're used to taking calls from people playing slot machines at casinos or video poker machines in restaurants and bars for probably 15, 20 years. That's the main type of person calling us. Anyone can get addicted, but I would say middle-aged women were kind of typical.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is different than other states, but that type of gambling, the VLTs and the slots, attracts women sometimes more.
VLTs, video lottery.
Video lottery terminals. Yeah, sorry, there's 100 different names for those. But I'm talking about the little hot spots that you see in neighborhoods. And so then, about 3 years ago, we started seeing a really big shift in our numbers. So not only did they double, our helpline calls double, but we started seeing more men. Now it's far more men than women calling us, and much younger people.
What do you see happen? I mean, is that they get behind in their bills? They've suddenly spent the kids' college money. I mean, what do you see happen to people?
So people start out gambling, what we call safer gambling. The rules for safer gambling on our website are things like make sure that you set a limit and stick to it. So they start out like that, right? And then they end up chasing losses. That's usually one of the first signs. So they lose money they didn't mean to lose. So they go get some extra money reserved for something else to put it in to try to get that money back. And then it becomes just a vicious cycle. And before you know it, people are not paying their bills. They're in thousands of dollars of credit card debt. They're spending all of their savings. They're asking friends and family for loans. They're even stealing. We hear story after story from people who have embezzled money to gamble. And it's striking because so often these are the type of folks that you would never imagine would steal. And it's honestly not their intention to steal it and keep it. What they say to us is, I just thought I would take it from work, and then as soon as I won, I was going to pay it right back. And that's always what they meant. But of course, it doesn't go that way. And we hear that from people not just stealing from work, but from, Little League or the PTO, a festival. You see these stories all the time. And a lot of times it's not reported in the media, but it is gambling related.
So let's talk about what does it take for somebody to cope with and get out of. I guess you're never like any addiction. You're never cured from gambling, but tell me what that process is.
Sure. And so when we talk to people, the very first thing we're going to do is, if necessary, a crisis intervention. Many people don't know that gambling has one of the highest rates of suicide of any addiction. So all of our people are trained and certified in intervention if they need to with someone who's feeling suicidal. So that's first. Then we're going to listen to them, listen to their stories, see where they're at, see what type of treatment they want. Some people are not ready for professional treatment. They want to go the self-help route. If that's the case, we have some options for them. We have a lot of literature that we can mail them or email them. There's a whole lot of recovery podcasts, books, and online resources that we've curated. Now, if someone's ready for professional treatment, we have a network of about 30, 40 counselors. These are people who are, master's level clinicians who've been through a lot of training on how to help people stop gambling. So they do, what we call cognitive behavior therapy or different types of intervention with them to work with them.
That was certified gambling counselor Sheila Moran speaking with Eric Douglas. To talk with someone about a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. A popular songbook for people who sing a style of traditional American music called shape note singing is getting an update. The book hasn't been updated in more than 30 years. Shape note singers are planning a gathering to celebrate and, of course, sing. The Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom's Justin Hicks reports.
In the small town of Benton, Kentucky, a few dozen people are gathered in the local courthouse to participate in the 142nd annual Big Singing. A plaque on the building claims it's the oldest indigenous musical tradition in the U.S. Now, the songs may sound a bit unusual to your modern ears. They're sung in an old style called shape note singing. Shape note music is printed with odd shapes like squares and triangles on the note heads, thus the name. It was popular in the early 1800s and took hold in rural areas where music education was rare, but church-related singings were big social events.
It is a method to teach people how to sing when you don't have an instrument.
That's Tim Reynolds. He's a longtime shape note singer who traveled to Benton from Nashville, Tennessee. He says part of the appeal is the warm, communal nature of singings, and Reynolds says some of the people aren't even great singers. It's just about making a joyful noise.
And they could not hold a tune in a bucket, but they're accepted, they're valued, and that's just part of it.
And now, for the first time in more than 30 years, the most popular shape note music book called The Sacred Harp is getting an update. John Plunkett is the chair of the Sacred Harp Publishing Company. It's a small nonprofit that's been printing the book and promoting shape note singing for nearly a century.
The book was originally published in 1844, and it's been revised every 25 to 35 years since that time. The current book that we're using came out in the early 90s. So it's just time.
Plunkett says each time the music book is revised, less popular tunes get removed and new compositions are added. He says it's important to keep adding tunes because it keeps the tradition dynamic and alive, not just frozen in history.
Sitting next to somebody and singing together. I think that's unusual and unique experience in our lives today.
The current edition of The Sacred Harp was published before the internet was ubiquitous. Then they got about 150 new tunes submitted. This time, nearly 1,200 songs were submitted, most by email. David Ivey was in charge of the 9-member committee that had to decide which tunes will make it into the new book and which may have to wait for the next generation.
And I think all of us feel sort of a weighty responsibility to revise a book that so many people care so much about.
The Song Selection Committee organized nearly a dozen singings across 3 countries to record the tunes and get a feel for them. Ivey said he would listen to those recordings over and over and over, sometimes on long road trips.
And I just wanted to hear these songs, and because you want to see, do you get tired of it?
Ivey says it's important the songs also sound old. He imagines what his great-grandfather, who also sang shape notes, would think of the new tunes.
And a lot of times you'll hear a song, you'll think, was that written 20 years ago, or was it written 120 years ago, or 220 years ago?
But which tunes and exactly how many will be in the new book? Ivey says that's top secret. Everyone will find out at the same time when the new Sacred Harp is released in September. They're expecting somewhere around 500 people to show up for a special singing in Atlanta, Georgia with the new book. It's expected to be the largest shape note gathering in a generation. I'm Justin Hicks in Benton, Kentucky.
Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Blue Dot Sessions, Hello June, and John Ingram. Bill Lynch is our producer. Abby Neff is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. You can find us on Instagram @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe to our newsletter and stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.